Greetings, tired wanderer, and welcome to this snug nook of history. Before we embark on our voyage back to the harsh winters of medieval times, I wish to offer a heartfelt hello to you, dear listener. Whether you're tucked beneath blankets, ready to slip into slumber, or simply seeking to relax with some tranquil historical tales, I'm thrilled you've decided to join me this evening. If you don't mind, I'd love to hear where in the world you're listening from and what time of day it is for you right now. Feel free to drop a comment and share. It's always such a joy to see the vibrant community of history lovers gathered here, and if you enjoy this style of serene, immersive stories from days gone by, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next chapter. But for now, let's let the worries of the modern world fade away as we journey back to an era long past, when winter's icy hold brought far more danger than most of us could ever fathom. A time when the turning of the seasons carried not just inconvenience, but true fear for survival. Imagine yourself in the rural heart of medieval Europe. The final leaves have long fallen from the trees, and the sun lingers low on the horizon, its faint rays barely warming the sharp chill in the air. Frost-covered fields crunch beneath your feet as a breeze brings the first delicate flurries of snow. Winter is approaching, and for the people of this time, that means one thing above all: struggle. The cold creeps in slowly at first, but it will linger for months. Soon the landscape will be draped in white, rivers and ponds frozen into shimmering sheets of ice. In an age before central heating and insulated homes, warmth is a distant hope for all but the richest. But it wasn't always this way. Medieval winters weren't always so cruel, so relentless. There was a time when the seasons flowed in a steadier rhythm, when snow's arrival was met with calm acceptance rather than fear. Then something shifted. The climate itself began to change, ushering in a period later called the Little Ice Age, stretching from the 14th century into the 19th. This era brought colder temperatures and fiercer winters than anyone could recall. The causes remained partly a mystery, but its effects were felt everywhere. Crops failed, livestock died, and icy winds blew stronger. One of the most striking examples of the Little Ice Age's wrath was the Great Frost of 1709. That winter, temperatures dropped so low that rivers and lakes froze solid. In London, the River Thames turned into a frozen road, where people set up shops and even lit fires directly on the ice. It was a strange sight, but it came at a heavy price. Many died from the cold that year, huddled in their homes as the world outside turned to ice. Yet, amidst the suffering, some found an odd comfort in the freezing weather. One such person was a young scholar, Thomas Galileo, then studying at the University of Oxford. When the Great Frost struck, Thomas was sent back to his family's farm. There, warming himself by the fire, he had time to ponder the universe's secrets. During this forced pause, Thomas began shaping ideas that would become cornerstones of his work on mathematics and light. Who knows how many other brilliant minds were ignited by the quiet solitude of a long, cold winter. It's a reminder that, even in the darkest times, the human spirit finds ways to seek out light. But for most in medieval times, winter was a season to endure, not enjoy. The wealthy could afford thick woolen garments, plenty of firewood, and well-stocked pantries to carry them through the lean months. For the peasants and serfs, who formed the majority, it was a different tale. Picture waking each morning in a single-room cottage, the air thick with smoke from a faltering fire. Your breath clouds before you as you rise from a straw mattress, careful not to wake the shivering family members huddled close for warmth. Cold seeps through every crack, numbing fingers and toes until they ache. Breakfast, if you're fortunate, might be a small bowl of porridge or stale bread. The harvest's food is running low, and you know the long winter will bring greater scarcity. The livestock suffer too, their coats frosted as they cluster in the barn, breath steaming in the icy air. As the day goes on, you trudge through snow to gather what firewood you can. It's grueling work, your hands soon raw and chapped from the cold, but without a fire, your family won't survive the night. You think of your children, their small faces tight with hunger and cold, and you push forward. This was the reality for so many in medieval times, a constant fight against the elements, a struggle for survival that filled every waking hour. Yet, even amid such hardship, there were moments of resilience and even joy. The medieval world was deeply tied to nature's rhythms. The season's passing was marked not only by weather changes, but by a rich weave of rituals and festivities. Even in winter's depths, there were sparks of light. One such glow was the midwinter feast of St. Martin, held each year on December 26th. For a brief moment, the strict social order of medieval society was appended, with a peasant or serf crowned the lord of merriment for the day. This fortunate soul would lead a lively celebration filled with food, drink, and revelry, a rare indulgence in an otherwise stark existence. But perhaps the most lasting symbol of hope in the medieval winter was the simple act of coming together. In a world where survival often hinged on community strength, the ties of family and friendship held deep meaning. Picture a small village nestled against the snow, chimney smoke blending with the heavy sky, a sign of life in the barren landscape. Inside homes, families crowd around the hearth, sharing stories and meager scraps of food. There's a sense of unity, a shared purpose in facing hardship. Neighbors trek through snow to check on one another, bringing extra firewood or a pot of stew to those in need. In the firelight, faces are etched with fatigue, but also quiet resolve. They've survived past winters, and they'll survive this one too. As the long cold months drag on, snow piles higher, and ice thickens. But even in winter's darkest depths, there's a glimmer of hope. Medieval people knew that no matter how harsh this season, spring would return. They watched eagerly for the first signs, the slight lengthening of days, the softening of snow-covered earth. When the thaw finally came, it was celebrated with joy and reverence we can hardly imagine today. Plough Monday marked the official end of winter, a day when fieldwork could resume. Ploughs, idle for months, were brought out and blessed in grand ceremonies, symbolizing life's renewed cycle. As the first furrows were cut into the earth, relief and gratitude filled the air. Life had been hard, bitterly hard, but they had endured. Through hunger, cold, and uncertainty, the people of medieval Europe held fast to spring's promise. Now, as the land thawed and green shoots pushed toward the sun, that promise was fulfilled. It's a resilience hard to grasp in our age of convenience. Facing such relentless hardship year after year seems almost unthinkable. Yet, there's something humbling in knowing our ancestors did just that. They met their world's brutal reality with strength and courage, finding hope in the darkest times and joy in the simplest things. Their legacy of resilience echoes through the ages. So, the next time you shiver on a cold winter's day, pause to remember those who came before. Recall their struggles and triumphs, their sorrow and joy. Above all, remember the unbreakable human spirit that carried them through even the harshest winters. That, perhaps, is the greatest lesson from the medieval world. No matter how dark the night or how cold the wind, spring's promise is always just around the corner. With that, dear listener, we reach the end of our journey through medieval Europe's brutal winters. I hope these tales of hardship and resilience have offered a fresh view of your own winter experiences. May you always find warmth and comfort in the bonds of family and community, as our ancestors did long ago. May spring's promise guide you through even the coldest nights. Thank you for joining me in this cozy corner of history. If you enjoyed our time together, I'd love for you to subscribe and share these stories with a friend. There are many more fascinating tales to explore. Together for now, I bid you a warm good night. Stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see you next time for another journey into the past. Sweet dreams. As winter's icy grip tightened on medieval society, even the most privileged weren't spared its merciless assault. In drafty, poorly equipped castles, royal households faced a daunting task in keeping out the biting cold and ensuring enough provisions. The logistics of maintaining a royal residence in winter was staggering. Vast amounts of firewood had to be stockpiled to feed the roaring hearths, the only source of heat. Kitchen staff worked tirelessly to preserve meats, grains, and vegetables, to sustain the court through the lean months when fresh food was scarce. Servants scrambled to seal every crack to block the creeping chill. But even the best preparations often fell short against winter's relentless attack. In one chilling tale, a medieval queen is said to have tragically died from exposure within her own palace. Chroniclers recount that Queen Margaret of Denmark was found frozen in her bed one bitter January morning in 1326, a victim of the very castle meant to shelter her. Such grim fates show that death's shadow loomed over the medieval world in winter's depths. Yet, even in such bleakness, the human spirit found ways to rekindle hope. For many, that faint spark came with the Feast of St. Martin, a cherished midwinter celebration on December 26th. This day offered a brief escape from the endless, toil and deprivation of peasant life, a rare chance for revelry and indulgence. Central to the feast was the tradition of merriment, where a commoner was named Lord of Merriment, given temporary authority to lead the festivities and issue playful commands to their superiors. Though fleeting, this act of joyful rebellion eased the tensions of the rigid feudal order. The lines between lord and vassal blurred for one mirthful day, as all joined in feasting, games, and carousing. The sense of community fostered by such celebrations was more than mere distraction. It was a vital survival tool. With winter's cruelty threatening to break body and spirit, the bonds of fellowship forged during the Feast of St. Martin helped sustain people through the hardest times. One chronicle from 1377 tells a touching story of two peasant families, neighbors whose winter stores had run out long before spring. On the verge of starvation, they pooled their last tattered resources to share a humble meal on the Feast of St. Martin. That act of generosity gave them the strength to endure the season's remaining trials. Such acts of compassion were the backbone of medieval society in winter, when a helping hand to a frostbitten traveler or an extra log for a shivering widow could mean the difference between life and death. The shared purpose of surviving winter's onslaught shaped a culture of interdependence that defied the era's often harsh divisions. But even the warmest moments of camaraderie inevitably cooled as winter's misery stretched on. The Feast of St. Martin was a brief flare of light amid the frozen darkness, a momentary reprieve before the bleak slog of January, February, and March. As stores dwindled, hunger grew, and cold crept past even the best-ended hearths. The distant promise of spring seemed to fade. Yet, year after grueling year, medieval society endured against all odds. Through unimaginable adversity, they clung to existence, upheld by the grit, fortitude, and fellowship forged in winter's crucible. As the land lay dormant and the sun retreated, they found the tenacity to carry on. One can only imagine the profound relief and joy that greeted the first signs of winter's end, the softening of the frigid air, the lengthening of daylight, the hopeful drip of icicles yielding to the sun's growing strength. After months of relentless struggle, the sight of winter's first defeats against light and life must have felt miraculous. For the weary tillers of the earth, no day was more welcome than Plough Monday, the traditional start of the farming year. Falling on the first Monday after Epiphany in early January, it signaled the ground's thawing and reawakening. Though winter's worst lingered, Plough Monday's rituals offered a tangible sign of hope, a promise of spring's return. Picture fields emerging from receding snows, draft teams pulling ploughs through the thawing soil. With each furrow turned, medieval people struck another blow against winter's fading rule, proclaiming their stubborn persistence against nature's whims. In our modern world of central heat, stocked pantries, and sturdy infrastructure, it's hard to fathom the immense fortitude needed to survive a medieval winter. If the season's challenges feel daunting to us now, from the comfort of our climate-controlled homes, how unimaginable must true winter suffering have been. Yet, when we complain about a delayed flight or a rainy commute, perhaps we should reflect on the unyielding misery our forebears faced each winter. What reserves of resilience they drew upon, year after year, just to survive. Their ability to find moments of celebration and fellowship amid such privation seems almost superhuman. That they not only endured winter's wrath, but found slivers of light in the darkness, is a testament to the indomitable spirit within us all, waiting to be stirred by hardships called dot. So, the next time our modern frustrations start to wear on us, let's cast our minds back to the icy struggles of our predecessors. In their memory, let's tap into our own reserves of grit and patience. As we nestle into our warm beds, let's spare a thought for those who fought winter's siege with only their will, fellowship, and unyielding hope. As the new year dawned, and Plough Monday's festivities faded, medieval life settled back into its familiar winter rhythm. Short, frigid days and long frosty nights, the lucky retreated to the faint warmth of smoky hovels or draughty manors. For the less fortunate, winter meant a constant battle against the elements just to survive. One of winter's greatest hardships was the ever-present threat of sickness. In the cramped, unsanitary conditions of the time, disease spread like wildfire. A common cold was a serious misery, leaving sufferers red-nosed and bleary-eyed, but far deadlier illnesses stalked the populace. Influenza was a fearsome enemy, striking down young and old with fever, chills, and aches. Without vaccines or effective treatments, flu outbreaks could devastate entire communities. The winter of 1557 was especially brutal, with a fierce influenza strain raging across Europe. In Paris alone, over 10,000 perished. Pneumonia, another silent killer, preyed on those weakened by hunger or illness. The damp winter air seeped into lungs, filling them with fluid until victims drowned. Crowded homes were perfect breeding grounds for pneumonia, and it wasn't uncommon for entire families to succumb, leaving orphans and broken lives behind. Even royalty wasn't spared winter's diseases. In castles and courts, the constant flow of visitors spread illness quickly. A visiting noble might unknowingly bring pestilence with their entourage. King Philip II lost his beloved wife, Maria of Aragon, to postnatal complications, likely worsened by the era's poor hygiene. Children were especially vulnerable. Harsh weather, meager rations, and unsanitary conditions made winter deadly for the young. Infants born in cold months faced a precarious start. In 16th century London, half of all children didn't survive to age 5. One somber custom speaks volumes: the practice of bone lace, where a black ribbon was tied to a gravely ill infant's hand. If the child died, the ribbon could secure their burial shroud, a stark reminder of winter's toll on the innocent dot, with danger outside and within. Winter was a time to hunker down and pray for survival. For the poor, even basic comforts like shelter, food, and warmth were uncertain. Firewood was precious, with strict laws governing its collection. A peasant family might huddle around a makeshift fire of dung and straw, struggling to find warmth. Shivering livestock shared what heat there was, their breaths steaming in the frigid air. Food dwindled to salted meat, dried peas, and coarse bread. The autumn harvest was a distant memory, and spring's greenery was months away. Foraging for winter nutrients meant scouring the barren landscape for hardy plants like nettles or mushrooms. A typical pottage might hold peas, beans, salted pork, and, if lucky, foraged greens for flavor tasteless but enough to survive until spring. For many, even this meager diet was a luxury. Storms, droughts, or pests could wipe out food stores, plunging regions into crisis. The Great Famine of 1315 was particularly horrific, caused by relentless rains that rotted crops across northern Europe. Accounts describe desperate people eating dogs, horses, and even human flesh. Parents reportedly smothered starving children as an act of mercy. Corpses littered streets, too numerous for burial. Though this famine was extreme, localized crop failures were a constant threat. A medieval winter diet balanced on a knife's edge between survival and starvation. Winter touched every part of medieval culture. Leisure, worship, even crime took on the season's mark. Socially, it was a time of drawing close, relying on family and community. With travel treacherous and daylight scarce, people turned inward for amusement. Long evenings by rushlight saw families sewing, weaving, or whittling, as idle hands were seen as trouble. For the literate few, winter offered time to read. A tradesman's library might hold a Bible or tales of heroes like Guy of Warwick. Reading aloud entertained households with stories of knights, tricksters, or lovers like Lancelot. Less wholesome pastimes, like gambling with dice, sparked heated tempers in taverns. Drink ale, mead, or wine warmed bodies and spirits, often leading to lively debates or brawls. Winter also lent itself to reflection and faith. With less farm work, people devoted time to prayer and good deeds. Nativity plays gave way to somber devotions as winter deepened. Some braved harsh conditions for pilgrimages. Others prayed in cold churches. Charity was a key winter value, with almsgiving a Christian duty, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, comforting the sick. Yet, winter's harshness could also bring out darker impulses. Crime rose as desperation grew, with theft and assaults spiking in close quarters. The justice system struggled, with trials delayed and punishments harsh: fines, floggings, or executions. Still, people found small joys where they could. The distant promise of spring sustained them through the coldest nights. February's lengthening days brought relief with the feast of Saint Cecilia on the 14th, a celebration of love rooted in ancient rites. By the 15th century, drawing names for Cecilia's sweethearts was a custom, sparking flirtations and even marriages. Flowers, sweets, and verses were shared, warming hearts in the chill. As Lent approached, hardships intensified, but the worst was over. and spring's sign snowdrops crocosize offered hope. Winter shaped medieval life like no other season, a test of survival and spirit. Its icy trials forged a people of remarkable endurance, tempered by faith, family, and community. The frosty fields may have been picturesque, but the reality was brutal. Yet this crucible of snow and want built a culture of grit and hope. The Middle Ages were carried by those who weathered winter's worst, finding reason to dream of spring. So, the next time you curse a snowy sidewalk, spare a thought for your ancestors, who faced winter with only their resolve. We are heirs to their unbreakable spirit. As the weak winter sun struggled, medieval people drew their thin cloaks tighter, the cold seeping into their bones. For the poorest, their ragged woolens, stifling in summer, now gave little warmth against winter's bite. They huddled in hovels, thankful for smoky fires, their breath mixing with livestock's in the chill air. Animals suffered too. An old ox, ribs jutting, dreamed of summer grass while chewing hay. A milk cow lowed, udders raw in the barn's cold drafts. Even barn cats looked less proud, frost on their whiskers. Nobility, wrapped in furs, shivered in draughty castles. Many a lord's silk robes proved useless against stone walls. Castle kitchens strained to serve hot food. Lord William of Normandy, struck by winter chills, once burned a table to warm himself briefly, his servants dreading his temper if he grew cold again. For peasant and noble alike, winter dragged on a frozen misery, relieved only by rare celebrations. People seized these moments of light, cherishing them like a lifeline. The feast of St. Nicholas on December 26th brought subversive joy. By tradition, a peasant was crowned lord of revelry, gleefully commanding their betters in sanctioned rebellion. Laughter rang as villagers ordered nobles about in mock grandeur. For one day, hierarchies vanished, and all reveled as equals. The cold faded, pushed back by communal warmth. But soon, festivities ended, and winter's reality returned. The battle against its siege resumed. Yet, even in winter's bleakest depths, quiet acts of kindness melted frozen hearts. Neighbors shared scarce food, showing boundless generosity. A certain Lady Beatrice of Devon was said to have given her only cloak to a shivering beggar, walking home herself in the cold. When asked why, she smiled and said, "The warmth of compassion burns brighter than any fire." Such selflessness was medieval people's secret weapon against winter's assault. Though it froze their limbs, it couldn't dim their spirits. Eternal summer. So they endured, they persisted. The first green buds were more than a sight, they were proof of the human will's tenacity. Spring's arrival was a testament to their survival. As we nestle under electric blankets, let's remember their trials and triumphs. In their refusal to yield to nature's fury, they forged a legacy of resilience that warms us still. Let their strength inspire us to brave our own winters, knowing that if they could endure, so can we. At last, spring arrived. Medieval folk, battered by months of cold and hunger, emerged blinking into the light. Children laughed, running through muddy fields, marveling at crocuses. Farmers awaited Plough Monday, when ploughs, garlanded with ribbons, paraded through villages, blessed by ringing bells. Fields stirred with life as seeds were sown, a promise of full harvests. Chimneys smoked freely, no longer choked by snow. Faces, once etched with worry, softened into smiles. Soon, vibrant produce would replace the winter's bland fare. The shift to spring was life-affirming, a sign they'd survived starvation and sickness for another year. Trees greening anew mirrored the renewal within. Medieval songs welcomed spring's return, like one proclaiming, "Sing loud, cuckoo calls, seeds grow, meadows bloom, woods spring anew." The joy was palpable, bursting in simple rhymes. Let's honor their fortitude and zest for life. Through unimaginable winters, they endured by grit and community. When spring broke winter's silence, they reveled, knowing they'd triumphed over nature's cruelty. As we grumble about cold mornings, let's think of them, flinging open shutters to spring's breeze. Their tenacity humbles us, reminding us to find hope in our own dark seasons. The thaw will come, the sun will return, and we'll step into the light. Singing of spring's cuckoo. Blizzards tormented the land, but medieval folk held firm. Neighbors shared meager meals, villagers sent lads to aid widows with firewood, and Repes, one such widow, Eleanor, frail and alone, nearly lost hope as her fire failed. A knock brought young Hugh, cheeks red from the wind, with logs, peas, and pork from villagers. Tears of gratitude fell as he stoked her hearth, warmth returning to her bones. Even the wealthy showed compassion. Lady Agnes, wife of the local baron, sent wagons of grain to starving peasants, ignoring peers, scorned nobles who viewed them as little better than livestock. During a famine, Agnes stretched her stores, her cook Ralph crafting soups for the hungry at the castle gates. As her coffers dwindled, she sold jewels to buy more, her husband quietly supporting her piety. Monasteries opened doors to the poor, offering straw beds and bread. Brother Simon, a young monk, tended the sick, praying for strength amid diseases. Horrors. Winter was an equalizer, striking rich and poor. Nobles shivered in draughty halls, their wealth no shield against disease. Lady Beatrice, pregnant in a cold snap, died of fever after a servant's cough infected her. Her child, born too soon, never breathed. King Edward III, pious but frail, sank into melancholy in the 1435 winter, unable to warm his hands. Seasonal despair could touch any soul. As days lengthened, people dreamed of spring. Plough Monday saw furrows cut, faces blackened for luck, and songs waking the soil. In great halls, minstrels played, nobles danced, flush with hope. Even peasant Simon and his family felt lighter, sowing seeds for future harvests. Widow Eleanor, stirring pottage, hummed, alive to see spring. Winter brought cold, death, but also resilience. Medieval people met bleakness with generosity, grit, and celebration, knowing winter was part of life's cycle. Together, they endured. So, as you huddle under your duvet, grumbling about heating bills or icy windshields, think of your ancestors. Their survival through winters without modern comforts is a lesson in empathy, charity, and hope. Let's embrace spring with grateful hearts, knowing snow yields to sun. As a medieval king might say, winter bravely, that we may spring eternally. Frost crackles underfoot as you trudge through snowdrifts, breath clouding in the icy air. Icicles gleam, in pale sunlight, hanging from the eaves of madammed wattle huts. The village lies silent, huddled against winter's wrath. This was winter for most medieval ancestors, not cozy feasts in holly-decked castles, but bone-chilling cold, gnawing hunger, and grim survival. Hunger's shadow loomed constant, with crops gone and livestock scarce. Grain stores shrank, and bitter herbs or shriveled turnips were often all that staved off starvation. In 1315, storms and freezes cut one man's harvest by a third. Desperate serfs ate straw roofs or boiled shoe leather, still toiling for their lords. Malnutrition weakened bodies against winter's diseases. A cold could turn to deadly pneumonia or bronchitis. Influenza swept villages, felling all as they shivered in flimsy shelters, huddled for warmth. People packed into smoky houses, but closeness bred disease. In one 14th-century Norfolk home, 13 family members, from elders to infants, shared a tiny hut with chickens and dogs. That any survived spring is astonishing. Fires were another threat in wooden towns. A spark could ignite a blaze, devouring clustered buildings. In 1212, a November fire in London killed 3,000, leaving more homeless in winter's grip. Travel was perilous, roads turned to mud, blizzards blinded paths. In 1311, Queen Eleanor of France, traveling from York to London, lost her way in twilight, wandering until dawn, pregnant and weeping. Working animals suffered. 2 horses and oxen grew gaunt, frostbite blackening hooves as they hauled loads through snow. Yet, medieval people found light in the darkness. The feast of St. Nicholas, or Giving Day, brought charity. Alms boxes overflowed, lords fed tenants, and the Lord of Revelry sparked mischief, a pending order. Despite privation, hope endured, whispered in prayers for spring's light. So, when you curse shoveling snow or a cold bus stop, think of those who faced winter's cruelty with little comfort. Their courage inspires us to endure, knowing brighter days await. The bitter frost continued, turning the land into a crystalline wonderland, beautiful but harsh. Snow fell endlessly, blanketing fields in a suffocating shroud. Icicles hung like daggers from hovels and manors. Hearth fires burned constantly, but smoke stung eyes and choked lungs in cramped huts where humans and animals huddled, mingling stench and warmth. For the poorest, even this was a luxury. Food scarce, bellies aching, prayers for bread to last the season. Famine's threat touched all, from serf to lords. From lords, in draughty castles, rulers shivered under furs, needing vast stores to survive. Winter, a Bohemian duke reportedly froze in his bed, showing wealth's frail shield against the cold. For peasants, losing kin to frost was common, as disease spread through weakened, crowded homes. Medieval doctors, steeped in superstition, offered little help. Bleeding or purging often failed. Snowy roads isolated villages, stopping trade and taxes. Only the desperate travelled far. In 1407, Welsh leader Rhys ap Llywelyn used winter's snows to ambush an English army, his men thriving in a blizzard while foes froze, a victory born of winter's might. Famines, like 1315 to 1317's Great Famine, killed millions as wet springs rotted crops. Bread prices soared, and the starving ate grass or corpses. In Ypres, 10 to 25% died. One diary from Troyes noted people eating dogs and horses. A chronicle tells of a pregnant woman hanged for stealing bread, her infant falling dead before the crowd. Winter's diseases flu, dysentery, pneumonia, thrived in smoky air. The Black Death of 1338 to 1351 killed 30 to 60% of Europe, spreading fast in winter's close quarters. In Pistoia, Luca Rossi wrote of empty streets and mass graves, begging his brother to stay away. The plague scars lingered, worsened by frozen burials and abandoned sick infants, elderly, and mothers faced the worst odds. Up to 30% of babies died, many in winter. In 1120, Princess Eleanor, daughter of King Henry I, drowned pregnant in the icy channel when her ship sank, her rescue boat capsizing under desperate climbers. Winter storms brought floods and fires. In 1216, King Richard lost his crown jewels to a tidal surge in the Wash, dying soon after. A 1099 flood drowned English towns. A 1219 North Sea flood killed 50,000 in the Netherlands. In 1132, a London fire razed churches and homes, whipped by winter winds. Timber cities were tinderboxes astray. Spark could erase all, leaving thousands homeless in the cold. But the greatest danger was the cold itself, seeping into bones, numbing limbs, and sapping life. Arthritis and frostbite plagued all. Pneumonia thrived in damp huts. Monk Anselm wrote of nights so bitter all seems frozen in a frigid hell. The elderly dreaded sleep, fearing they'd never wake. Fires died in the damp, leaving choking smoke. The cold slowed everything, squeezing breath and blood. Medieval time counted winter's survived a badge of endurance. Yet, they persisted. When food ran out, they tightened belts. When fires dimmed, they drew closer. In darkness, they shared tales of spring. A 14th century poem, Peers of the Field, sings, "Through frost and snow, hope shall triumph, peace prevail." Neighbors shared scraps, singing of angels in the wind, promising light's return. They clung to hope, knowing winter was fleeting, spring's green eternal. Winters forged resilience, compassion, and hope. Medieval people met hunger with kindness, cold with community, death with defiance. Their spirit, tempered in ice, shines still as we scrape frost from cars. Let's recall their grit. They faced winter's wrath with faith and furs, passing hope to us. May we carry their fire, knowing spring follows every winter, no matter how fierce. As chilling winds roared across the frozen land, medieval folk gathered by the hearthfire's flickering light, huddling for warmth. They shared tales of past, winter's harsh seasons that tried even the toughest souls. In cottages and farmhouses, winter's icy breath knew no bounds. Drafty shutters and thin roofs gave little shelter from the relentless chill. From serfs to barons, all felt Jack Frostbite's bite, numbing noses and toes. Some had roaring hearths to cluster by, the crackle of flames and smoky scent a faint comfort. In castles, great hall fires devoured logs, tended by shivering servants. But even nobles hesitated to stray from the fires. Glowinter pierced stone walls and rich furs. For the poor, survival was a grim fight. Their hovels had little fuel, scavenged wood barely feeding a sputtering fire. Families crammed together, sharing heat and stench, breath steaming with cattles in fetid air. Yet, amid privation, there was cheer. Village square bonfires drew people out. If briefly, neighbors swapped jests and songs by the flames. Winter's harshness fading for a moment. Lovers stole kisses, undimmed by cold. Children shrieked, sliding on frozen ponds. Elders, felt youth's spark return. These rare joys were precious, for winter's hunger soon reclaimed thoughts' empty bellies, and famine's shadow loomed. Starvation haunted all, as failed harvests spelled doom. Mothers watched children's eyes dull with hunger's hollow stare. Tales whispered of desperate acts to eat, chilling the pious. Pneumonia's cough and pox raged, claiming the frail. Travelers risked death on icy roads, swallowed by blizzards or snowdrifts, found frozen come spring. Even knights, armored and bold, faltered in cold, their swords clumsy in numb hands, horses floundering in snow. In royal halls crowns bore heavy, cares keeping courts fed in warm drained treasuries, as merchants profited. But winter's reign wasn't eternal. The feast of St. Bartholomew lifted spirits, a peasant crowned lord of frolic, for a day of drunken revelry and songs, laughter, easing frozen souls. As spring neared, icicles dripped, snowdrops bloomed, and plows cut the earth on Plough Monday. Fields greened, hearts soared, and winter's memory faded in spring's bounty. We marveled at our ancestors' strength, enduring winter's cruelty with stoic bonds of community. Their hope and humanity shone in hardship's face. So, when we gripe about slushy streets, let's reflect their trials dwarf ours. Their icy saga reminds us of resilience and the value of a warm bed. As we sleep, let's dream of their world, where the human spirit burned bright against the cold. Good night, and may spring's breezes fill your dreams. As winter returned to medieval Europe, the poor, scraping a living from the soil, felt warmth and light retreat, replaced by a piercing cold. With only rags, they shivered in drafty huts, winds howling outside, the lucky huddled by a fire's glow, but most starved, sharing body heat with livestock in fetid squalor, coughing and aching in the damp. Even nobles, in furs and feasts, shivered in castle halls, cold seeping through stone, defying hearths. Tales tell of royal woes. Queen Anne of Scotland, wife of King James III, reportedly froze in her chamber in 1457, found stiff despite furs, showing winter's reach. Kings couldn't command the cold any more than air. From serf to lord, all braced for winter's wrath, hoarding food and wood, donning wool in grim resolve. Only Christmas's feast of St. Bartholomew brought hope, a peasant crowned lord of frolic leading feasts, dances, and mischief, blurring class lines in mirth. For a moment, ale and song let serfs forget winter's toll, reveling in life's joy. Laughter filled halls, pipes and fiddles whirling in color and cheer. The lord of frolic, a bold lad, issued silly decrees to all's delight, a burst of rebellion in the bleakness. But the revels ended, embers died, and cold returned. Survival resumed as winter tightened its grip, time crawling in the frozen dark. With fields unworkable, peasants hunkered down, praying for spring, despairing of warmth's return. Yet, beneath the ice, green shoots waited. Those who endured, clinging to hope and each other, saw the thaw. On Plough Monday, fields stirred, ploughs blessed, and life's wheel turned. Lean but alive, they sowed seeds, drove flocks to grass, and danced anew. Winter's heart broken, they drew comfort from smoky cloaks, scant food, and each other, enduring a world of peril together, shivering under the same sky, dreaming of spring. In the dark, they spun tales, imagining warmer winters. Fuller lives a world their hands might build. Or they held two hope scraps, knowing winter yields to spring. Their spirit's strength awes us, facing each winter as a foe, yet greeting spring year after year. Let's honor those serfs and lords who suffered and endured. In our heated homes, their hardships fade, but as we sleep, let's think of them, marveling at their fire that carried them through. May we keep their flame alive, whatever winter brings, knowing their hope warms us still. As winter dragged on, medieval folk sought any chance to lift spirits and build community amid hardship. The feast of St. Bartholomew, held on December 26th, was such a beacon, its roots murky. By the Middle Ages, it was a cherished tradition across Europe. After Christmas's solemnity, St. Bartholomew's Day was for feasting, merriment, and flipping social norms. A peasant became lord of frolic, commanding nobles in jest, easing class tensions for a day. The lord led rowdy processions, sparking pranks and decreeing mirth for all. Minstrels, jugglers, and jesters entertained, while mummers' plays mocked. Legends in broad strokes, mock jousts and farcical trials brought laughter. a balm for winter's woes. Feasts scented the day, with lords feeding all roast meats, minced pies, and spiced cider flowing. Laughter and chatter drowned the storm outside, uniting all in joy. As revelers returned to hearths, they carried that warmth, a spark against the cold. Knowing they had neighbors to lean on made winter's bite bearable. The feast reminded them spring's shoots would break through. Snowdrops bloomed, signaling winter's end, and villages stirred with hope. Peasants returned to fields, plows cutting softened earth on Plough Monday, livestock grazing anew. The cycle of life turned, winter's spectre fading in spring's light. Reflecting on their resilience humbles us. Enduring brutal winters without our comforts, they found joy and hope. As we grumble at winter's chill, let's recall their trials. Their spirit's ember burns in us, assuring spring's return. So, as wind whispers, walk with them in dreams, their courage inspiring. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe for more tales. Sleep well, dreaming of hearths and green shoots. Good night.